Hey guys, this is going to be a vigilante version, but this is going to be a what if fem deku is nergagantey. So nergagantey is a legendary dragon, legendary dragon from no legendary monster from Monster Hunter World, and nergagantey is a very vicious creature, and if they're threatened, they lash out not very, a lot. So I'm going to start with the birth of Nergigante and finish off with the death of Nergigante. And Nergigantes normally have a longer lifespan than most monsters or humans alike. So yeah, it's going to be a while. So we start off with a little kid in the forest running from a man who is saying, "Get back here, you brat. I need to kill you like you did to my wife." And this man has wings like a demon does, and his wife had a pair of horns like a demon does, but they didn't want a full demon for their child, so he's getting pissed off at his daughter, his biological daughter, but he doesn't call her his daughter, and she's currently 6 years old, and she knows what heroes are. She knows that in the future she wants to be a hero. But what she doesn't know is her quirk, because her father never took her to the quirk doctor. All she knows is she has a pair of horns on her head and a pair of wings and spikes on her back. And really sharp nails that are very, very hard to dull. And everything that is plated with this chitin like substance is very hard to damage. So she's running at inhuman speeds for her age, and this man is barely keeping up. And he finally uses his wings and starts flying over to her, and she starts trying to use her wings, but Nergigante and the dragon or monster hunter cannot use their wings very much. But when they do, they can fly very, very fast, and that speed goes to distance because they are very strong when it comes to speed. So when she actually is able to lift off the ground, she starts flapping her wings really fast and really strong. So she darts off into the middle of the forest, and this man who's following her sees her crash, and then he gets to the crash site, and she's disappeared. And when she crashed, she lost some of her scales and skin, and she ran away. She lost the skin on both sides of her chest and her gut. And when she gets to the cave that's in the mountain near her, she sits there and she falls asleep and is asleep for like 2 days before she wakes up and feels stronger. So she gets out of the cave in a slow walk, and when she sees the entrance to the cave, she's like, the cave seems to have gotten smaller. And she gets to a river and she hears the running water, so she runs faster, and she doesn't notice, but she's running on all fours. And she gets to the water and starts drinking and see with her eyes closed, and she opens her eyes to see what the water looks like, and she sees a reflection of a monster. And she roars in fear, and she's like, "Wait, what happened to me?" So she looks at her hands and she sees claws like a dragon would have, and she stands up on her legs and she sees the claws of a dragon for her back legs. And she sees this and is like, what the hell happened to me? And she thinks of her human form, and she goes to her human form, and she looks like this with huge freaking horns, lots of scales, and big freaking wings. And she starts flying home, or in the direction of home that she thinks home is, and she runs into the Wild Wild Pussycats area. And Tiger sees this and says, "Is Ragdoll track that thing in the sky?" And Ragdoll runs out and sees this and uses her ability to start tracking it. And later that day, she lands from exhaustion, but she's super far away from the Wild Wild Pussycats, and all of a sudden she hears a car driving up, and she thinks it's her father, and she remembers what he was saying the few days before, so she gets on defense. And all of a sudden, this girl pops out, and she goes, "Who are you? And why are you in the forest?" And she goes, I'm running. And this girl says, my name is Mandalay, and I'm here to help. But she finally pops her head in, and she's not moving her mouth. And she starts freaking out, being like, what's going on? And Mandalay finally speaks and says, I'm a telepath, and I can say stuff to you if you are human. So I know you're a human, and I know you're scared, so I'm here to help. And she slowly kites the girl out, and the girl is finally put in the back of the car and driven back to the lodge. And when she's taken out, she sees the rest of the Wild Wild Pussycats, and they go, "Ooh, if none of us were had mutation quirks, we would be scared of you." And Mandalay says, "Not the time, Pixie Bob." And she goes, I know. So they say, what is your story? And she starts telling her story of how when she was born, her mother died, and her father has been hurting her ever since. And every time he hits her, this scale stuff grows. And the last 2 days after she crashed on the ground from flying a little, she gained a monster form, and they look at her and go, so you have a transformation quirk? And she goes, apparently, I don't know. So the Wild Wild Pussycats say, we will gladly take care of you until we can find your father and take him to jail for what he's done to you. And she goes, thank you, and I can even prove that I can only grow these scales when I'm hurt. So she cuts her arm where there's no scales and says, tomorrow this will be covered with this strong chitin-like substance. And they go, what do you mean chitin-like substance? And she peels off one of her scales because she's super strong and says, if you look at this through a microscope, apparently it's called a microscope, but you look at this through a machine, and this will look like a chitin-like structure. And they go, and they're like, okay, since Ragdoll is more of a scientist in this one, she pulls out her microscope and looks at it and says, oh, this does look like chitin. But this is a mixture of chitin and crystal. And they look at her and go, what? And she goes, yeah, this is stronger than titanium. This is more heat resistant than titanium. And they all look at this child in front of them and ask, what is her name? And her name is, I'm thinking of a name real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, I got a name. If anybody can place this name, you get 10 billion points that do absolutely nothing. Anko. She says her name is Anko, and she says her name is Anko Midoriya, and that she is apparently a quirked individual that has a quirk called nergagantey. And they all look at her and go, okay. And so your quirk's name is nergagantey, and it's like the legend of that one monster. And she goes, I don't know, I haven't tested all my abilities, and apparently yes. I forget if nergagantey has a breath attack, so I'm just going to say she has lightning breath. If that's wrong, just tell me in the comments, and when you guys want me to make this a series, tell me, and I'll look it up and make sure it's correct, because Yeah. So she goes, I apparently have all the abilities. I don't know. I haven't tested. So they go, okay, so while we're getting evidence for you to be adopted by us and taken in by us, we'll be testing your quirk to see what you need to improve and what you can not improve and what you're good at. And she goes, okay. 3 years later, Anko has a perfect control of her quirk, and she prefers to be around reptilian creatures. And what she loves is when there's pythons around, because he loves playing with pythons and how cold they are, because she's a warm-blooded creature. And the wild pussycats have a natural fear of snakes, but Anko doesn't. She loves them, and she has a terrarium in her room with a big tank of snakes. And by this time, Coda is adopted by Mandalay, and they've been getting along. Hold on, I'll be right back. So it was the 3-year time skip. So Anko has full control over her quirk, and she has full control over the transformation. And she's been taught by Mandalay, Tiger, Ragdoll, and Pixie Bob fighting techniques with claws. So Mandalay finally says, we have enough evidence to support the claim of you being abused, and we shall now take it to court to take you from your father. And she starts crying, being like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then Mandalay looks down and says, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to go to your father for a few days while we settle this in court. And Izumi looks down and says, okay. So she gets back to her father, and her father's ability is Curse Mark. Or if his nails, if he sets in 4 nails on or 5 nails onto a target, he can lock their quirk away. So he sees her, and he's like, damn monster, you survived? And she's like, yeah, I survived, Dad. I'm back, and I'm only here for a few days. And he goes, huh, you won't survive those few days. And he immediately uses his quirk, and he launches and grabs her neck and leaves the claw marks, and this mark appears on her neck, and her wings, her scales, everything disappears. And he sees this and is like, finally I get to kill you. And Mandalay and Ragdoll, who were outside, was overhearing this entire conversation and recording it via a body cam that they attached to Anko. And the body cam fell off mid attack because the curse mark basically made the scales fall off that that weren't a part of her anymore because of her quirk being canceled and being absorbed back into her body. So her wings disappear, her horns go away, her spikes and claws and everything goes away, but her scales fall off, and she looks normal now. And the curse mark is on the back of her neck in a very obvious spot, and it starts to burn and sear at her. So later, or like a few minutes in, and he's beaten her to a bloody pulp, and she's on the ground, knocked out, basically dying of her injuries. And Mandalay finally busts in, asking, what the hell did you do to your own daughter? And he goes, that's not my daughter, that's a freaking monster. And Mandalay slaps him, being like, that is your daughter, she's your own kin. And he goes, I never wanted her. She was just an accident. And Mandalay picks up Anko and rushes her to the hospital. And Ragdoll cuffs Hisashi Midoriya. Yeah, Hisashi. And she takes him to the police station and says that he is hereby arrested of child abuse and must go to court for the legal authorization of his daughter to be taken away from him. So he can't see his daughter or do anything close to his daughter anymore. And the cops are like, okay, we'll hold him in a holding cell. And he's a little stronger than a normal person because of his quirk. So he breaks out of his cell and runs away with the cuffs on the floor. And All Might sees the breakout and stops him and beats him up a little, just enough so he can't move. So All Might puts him back in the cell and says we need to reinforce his cell so he can't get out. And at this time, he hit All Might with a claw mark to the side of his gut, and All Might's quirk turns off. So he buffs down a little bit, and he goes, what the hell is this? And the guy behind bars starts laughing, saying, I can seal away quirks for a while, and once the seal is turned off and goes away, it makes the quirk 10 times stronger, but it also makes it uncontrollable. So that damn monster is going to be an actual monster by the time that she enters UA, and he starts laughing his ass off. And All Might, who's still in somewhat of a buff form, so he has human strength. He has above average human strength. He punches him and says, you can stop calling that girl that you considered your daughter at one point. And he goes, I never did. She's a damn monster, and she'll always be. He goes, you can stop calling that girl that is your blood a monster. So he's sent to jail for attacking a hero and for escaping the holding cell, and has a restraining order on him that if he goes near his daughter within 20 feet of his daughter, he will activate her quirk automatically, and she will easily attack him and completely annihilate him. So it's time for your UA entrance exams. And since Mandalay has been taking care of Anko, she has gotten used to the motherly love from Mandalay that she shows Koda and her. And she calls Mandalay mom, and Koda calls Mandalay mom because he's gotten over his hatred of heroes. And Anko, who couldn't practice with her quirk until a day before UA, these entrance exams, walks into UA's entrance exams and asks for a slot by herself because if she loses control from her quirk, because of what her dad did, she could easily kill other students, and she doesn't want that. And Nezu, hearing about what her dad did and what his quirk could do, and says, sure, I will see about having you go after and see what you could do by yourself. And she says thank you, and she walks into the practical test before everybody else is done with the actual test, and she has 15 minutes to get as many points as possible. And her scales and horns finally grow back, and she has searing pain all over her body, and the curse mark finally wraps around her body, and she falls on the ground and is rolling around in pain, and the wings grow out of her back and snap, crackle, pop. The bones are getting into alignment. After like 15 minutes of searing pain, she finally gets up, and her eyes are puffy red from crying in pain, and Recovery Girl was standing there to see if any blood started to drip, and nothing came out. So she's like, okay, we're fine. And she's now completely and utterly covered with scales. She doesn't look very human. The only part that isn't covered in scales is her elbows and her knees and her face in this picture. Everything else is covered in scales. She still does have hair. And her hair is green, long green. So she uses a little bit of her sadistic personality, because Anko is sadistic, yes, I know. And she runs into the arena before the gates fully open. She busted a hole through them, and Cementos, who was watching to see what would happen to the concrete gates, saw them shatter, basically, from her ramming into it. And she transformed into her monster form, and she saw only red. She could control her forms perfectly fine, except for her monster form. That's what became uncontrollable. After all the robots were destroyed, she saw the monster form of her, saw the zero pointer, and started ripping it to shreds. And when there was no more monsters left behind, she transformed back into human form and looked around and acted like she never saw any of this happen. And Nezu's like, okay, I think I know what's uncontrollable now. And they all go, okay, what is? And he goes, when she transforms into her monster form, she loses all sense of right or wrong, friend or foe. All she knows is kill. And they look at him and go, what do you mean? And he says that there is a legend of a powerful monster that used to be classified as a dragon called Nergagantey, and its only source of pleasure was killing. Its only source of anything was killing, so it just killed. And now that we see another Nergagantey, we believe that the instincts of Nergagantey have transferred into the human host of the quirk, and it's now the downside of her quirk. If she transforms at all into the monster, she loses all right or wrong, and all semblance of her human self. They look at him and go, that makes sense. And Anko, who walks out of the area, sees Recovered Girl and says, I'm fine. I don't remember any of the tests, though. And she sees the other students walking towards the ground, and she starts running away because she doesn't want to hurt anybody. And she runs into the main building of UA, and this boy who's 2 years older than her runs into her and says, oh, sorry. And she looks at him and she says, I'm sorry, excuse me. And she starts running in one direction. And he goes, oh, where are you going? And she goes, I need to see Nezu. And he goes, oh, it's the other way. You need a shortcut. And she goes, thank you. And she starts running the other way, back past him. And he said, hopefully you find it okay. And he walks to his class, and Nejire, who saw him bump into this kid, asks who was that, and he goes, I don't know. She just bumped into me, and she needed to go to Nezu. I'll be right back. And Mirio, who was standing next to Nejire, says, seriously, Tamaki, you didn't even get her name? And he goes, what? Sorry that I'm not as smart as you. I'm still nervous around anybody. And he goes, you weren't nervous around her? And he goes, oh yeah, I wasn't. Why, though? And they go, you're just weird that way. And they start laughing it off, and Tamaki laughs with them a little. He chuckles at this and goes, let's get back to class. And they go, sure. And they go back to class, and Anko gets to the principal's office and waits for Nezu in the chair that can hold her wings behind her. And Nezu walks in, and he sees that she's already here, and he walks to his desk, sits down, and says, I have a proposition for you. And she says, what is it? And he says, when you find something to help you ground yourself to your human side, I would like you to tell me, and I will increase your training near that person. Because this quirk you have is uncontrollable when you transform into your monstrous form. And she goes, what? And he says, when you busted through the gates and you got punched by one of the robots, you immediately transformed into the monster form and started ripping things to shreds, and it looked like you enjoyed it. And she goes, I don't remember any of the tests. I just remember her coming out and there's people already walking towards me. And he goes, exactly. We had to divert everybody from that test area because we needed to send all the robots after you so you could calm down. And she goes, okay. Nezu says, your downside of your curse mark, the one that your father gave you. And she starts getting a little angry and her horns start to grow a little bit longer. And he goes, hold on. When you transform into a monster, you don't remember anything. You black out and you are going off of instinct. And she's like, okay, that makes sense. What else? And he goes, you are forever to be in class 1A, and if Aizawa says you're expelled, you're actually not. I'm forbidding him from expelling you and forbidding anybody from talking bad about you because you could easily lose control at this moment. But when you find that thing that anchors you, I want you to tell me immediately. And she goes, okay. And it's now a week later, and she finally walks into UA. Ooh, which one? Which one is it? Sombra! I want to watch that. And it's a week later, and Anko walks into the room, and she says hi to everybody, and Mina says, oh, you look so cool! Kirishima's like, rad, bruh! And Shoji just goes, And the tail dude just still talking to Hagakure, and Ida looks at her and goes, who may you be? And he acts almighty, and she goes, I am the last student in this class, and I need you to take the stick out of your ass before I can talk to you properly. And she turns back to Mina and Kirishima and starts talking to them. And he's like, that is very rude. And she goes, I don't care. Pull a stick out of your ass and I'll talk to you. And she goes back to talking with Mina and Kirishima. And he goes back to yelling at Bakugo. And Bakugo starts laughing, going, I like her. You do need to pull the stick out of your ass. And he goes, you could stop talking down to students that way. And he goes, no. All y'all are extras. I'm here to become the number one. And Anko hears this, goes, that's funny. You think that you're going to become number one. That's funny. I'm going to be number one. And he goes, you damn extra are going to be number one? The hell? And since he never had Izuku or Izumi, the female version of Deku, to beat on, he never increased the power of his quirk. So he trained the last 10 months and didn't have anybody else. No. He didn't have anybody else to beat on, so he didn't train it the last 11 years, no, 12 years. So his quirk is weaker in this one. And Aizawa wakes up and says, okay, all you problem children, time to go out and do the test. And Izumi says, yes, test. And so Izumi walks out to the training field without any uniform on or any clothes on, because she still has... God damn it, my cat's being an idiot. So she still has the scales on, so she doesn't need any clothes or uniform, and she walks out and she's just standing there, and Aizawa walks out and says, so the thing about Nezu is that he told me you can't be expelled. And she goes, I know, and I don't really care for that rule. The only rule I say is you give me a fair test like everybody else. And he goes, well, I'm going to lie to them. And I'm going to lie saying that the last person who's expelled is the last person on the leaderboard is expelled. But what I'm really going to do is the person who shows the least heroism will be expelled. And she goes, how do you tell if they're heroic or not? And he goes, by their quirk and how they use it. And she goes, okay. That kind of makes sense. And he goes, good. And I know I've seen you at work, so I don't need to see you here, but I'm going to still test you like everybody else. And she goes, that's fine. And everybody else starts walking out. And they see Aizawa talking to Anko and like, what are they talking about? And he goes, okay, problem children, when they're just getting to earshot range. Time to do some tests. And he throws the ball to Anko and says, you got first on the entrance exams, and you only got first on the entrance exams because of the issue that we had. And she goes, if I didn't get first, then don't count me as first. And he goes, oh no, you did get first, but that issue is what deducted points from you, and you still got first. She goes, oh, okay. And so she takes the ball and walks into the circle and chucks it. And nergagantey is super strong, so she chucks it with the power of a nergagantey, and it breaks the sound barrier like 10, 12 times. So it just reaches the outer atmosphere, and it starts to descend slowly, and it finally reaches maximum velocity, and it falls to the ground at a speed that makes it look like a meteorite slightly. And when it hits the ground, it shows the distance from Japan to America, or the East Coast, from Japan to the East Coast, because they go from Japan over Hawaii, over California, all the way to New York. That's the distance that she threw, and everybody looks at this and goes, the hell are you? And she goes, I'm a human. And Aizawa is holding back a laugh because he knows exactly what she is and what her quirk does. So he says, next test, and he throws it to Bakugo. Bakugo gets lower than canon, 560 some odd meters. So they go to the race, and she uses her wings and her legs to blast forward in a charge, and she gets faster than Nita. Then it's the grip strength. She breaks the machine. Shoji does not break the machine, but he does get a measurement, and it's really powerful. It's now the side-to-side jumps, and Mineta still gets infinite because he's just bouncing back and forth between his balls. But she does get a really high number, beating everybody else, and he then asks at the end what is a true hero to all the students, and they all gave their own answers, and Anko says a true hero is someone who will risk life or limb just to save somebody, not without the ideals of getting a reward. And Aizawa says that that's the correct answer, and everybody else needs to learn that quickly. And he says the only one who didn't use their quirk for the task of being a true hero was Mineta. And Mineta looks at him and he goes, what do you mean? I just used my quirk like everybody else used their quirk. And he goes, yes, but that incident in the locker room and the Jiro incident happened in canon. And he goes, what incident? There was no incident. And Jiro goes, yeah, the one that I stabbed you in the eye. And he goes, oh. And Aizawa says, yeah, heroes can't act like that. So you are expelled. And Mineta is gone. Aoyama is still Aoyama and weird, and he's still in class. So we skip a few days for the heroes versus villains, and I'm adding someone to class that many of you may know by Tetsu, and I'm changing his quirk slightly. His quirk is hardening at a base level, but further in, his quirk is hardened great swordsman. So he turns into a steel man, and he gets a great sword made out of bone. And Izumi, seeing this, starts freaking out, being like, oh god, oh god, oh god. And it's on instinct she starts freaking out, and Aizawa cancels Tetsu's quirk, so the bone sword just crumbles into dust. And he goes, what the hell was that for? And he goes, we have someone who has a quirk that is counteracting that one. And he points at Anko and says, she started freaking out once he brought out the sword. And he goes, oh, okay, so she is a legendary monster from the stories? And he goes, yep. And he looks at her very closely and says, you look like the image of that one monster that my dad had said never to look for or fight. And he just keeps looking and looking, and Aizawa says, okay, I'm not teaching the next class. You are going to teach. You're going to have a special teacher, and All Might runs in with his normal speech of, I am here, walking through the door like a normal person. And they get out to the area, and Izumi's still just dressed like this, and they ask where's her hero costume, and she points at her scales and says, this is my hero costume. And they go, okay. So it's now the last match, which is Anko, Tetsu, Bakugo, and Kirishima. And Kirishima also has a sword quirk, but he has the long sword, not the great sword. So he stays at the bomb, saying that he can protect it, and he starts using his sword, and it's a bone sword too, but he hardens into rock still. And Tetsu says, I can deal with Kirishima, and you can deal with Bakugo. And she goes, okay. So Tetsu runs in and past Bakugo, and Bakugo's like, okay, you damn extra, and he's about to fly after Tetsu when Tetsu uses his sword and bashes him in the head, saying, you gotta fight her, and then runs away. And Bakugo sees this girl with glowing eyes in front of him, and he sees this. No. Bakugo and Kirishima are the hero team. The villain team is her and Tetsu. So Tetsu runs outside and starts fighting Kirishima, and Bakugo runs into the room with the bomb, and without a bomb, and says, where's the bomb? And she goes, different room, and she starts running at him full charge, and she hits him with her horns, and the fight goes on. Eventually she wins, and Tetsu wins too. It's now the USJ, and Kurogiri portals in. Everybody's on guard except for Tetsu, Kirishima, and Anko. They run down and they're fighting villains, including Aizawa, who says, you damn brats, I'm gonna make you do extra work for this. And they go, okay, sensei, and they just keep fighting. So Nomu finally comes out, and Anko says, sensei, that thing isn't human, can I kill it? And he goes, no beast form, only human form, but yes, you can. And she finally gets up to the creature, and she punches it with her claws, and the thing punches her, and her armor cracks, and she spits up a little bit of blood, because her entire internal organs have been crushed. And she starts going into a rage mode of sorts, and she grows in size, and she forms the full form of Nergagantey, and she dashes at the Nomu, hitting it with her horns, then using its mouth and claws to rip it apart limb by limb. And now it's time for her to find out who she values the most. And so after it's ripped from limb to limb, Shigaraki grabs its horn, her horn, and her horn slowly crumbles away into dust, and he grabs the other one and slowly crumbles away into dust, and she starts screaming from the pain of her horn being decayed. So she starts going into even more of a rage, and her horns aren't growing back. And Tetsu seeing this is like, oh crap. And he says, Kirishima, we need to use them now. And Kirishima goes, no, I vowed to never use that sword again. And he goes, yes, you vowed to never use it again, but since we've grown up, we've fought 3 of them, and she is the final one. And he goes, wait, she is? And he goes, yeah, we're not here to kill, so use the other one that doesn't kill. And he goes, oh, okay. And they harden, they bring out their swords. Kirishima has a sword that looks feathery, and Tetsu has a sword that also looks feathery. I think it's feathery. The paralyzing or the sleep-inducing one. I forget what their swords look like. The long sword and the great sword. But Tetsu jumps off the stairs while Anko is right at the base of the stairs, and he starts spinning like a hammer, and he lands on her, and he does a cut down one of her wings, and there's blood coming out, and Aizawa says, what are you doing? And he goes, we're paralyzing her so she can fall asleep. And he goes, what do you mean? And they go, we're monster hunters. We came from the hidden island. And Aizawa goes, what hidden island? And they go, we'll tell you later. And Kirishima and Tetsu continue fighting the full release nergagantey, and they finally make her pass out and is paralyzed. And they fist bump, saying, that was harder than the last three. And Kirishima nods, saying, yeah, it was. And Aizawa walks down saying, so, what happened? And they go, we fought Nergagantey, the monster, and we paralyzed Nergagantey, but we didn't kill Anko Midoriya, the child. And Aizawa says, what do you mean that there's a island built around island with monsters on it? And they say just that. There's an island out in the middle of the ocean that's hidden from normal people like you and All Might, but not me and Kirishima, where you can go and fight monsters. And the more monsters you fight, the more energy and souls basically you absorb from them, and you increase your power tenfold each time you kill one. But we're not here to kill Nergagantey. We were sent here to control Nergagantey, because Nergagantey is the king of all kings, besides the legendary moving islands of the Titans that we cannot kill in a reasonable amount of time. And he goes, I'm starting to get overloaded. You're going to have to explain to her, and she's going to have to dumb it down for me. And they go, we will. And so 10 days later, she wakes up, and she's finally awake enough to talk and understand people, and she gets ready for a fight because she thinks that she's still in the middle of a fight. And Kirishima says, ho, 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 hold on. You're not in the middle of a fight anymore. He blacked out and went all Nergagantey rage mode. And she goes, how did you know I was a Nergagantey? And he goes, I've fought multiple elder dragons, and they're nowhere even close to as strong as you. There's legends built around you, even on mainland. And she starts asking questions. They fill her in on the whole entire monster extinction on mainland, and the only monsters left are on this island. So they say that we are here to take you back to the monster island, and we called it the Monsters World. And there's monster hunters there that will probably attack you at first sight because you look like a Nergagantey. But if we stay near you, since we are the highest ranking monster hunter that you could possibly get, and she asks, how old are you two? And they go, that's not important. And they go, we have some of the first quirks, and let's go to the world. And so they use a bone artifact that they've had from some of the elder dragons that they've made, and they open up a portal and they walk through, and she walks into this lavish area of plants and animals, and she starts to feel at home, unlike the mainland where she'd never felt at home. And they say if you can prove to be a nice and prideful or nice and good monster hunter, you can go back to the mainland because we have now set you on a path to become a monster hunter. 10 years later, I know, it's big time skip, but Anko finally is a monster hunter and she's killed multiple nergaganteys that have been born from the uh, the elder dragons, I think. Yeah, I think the big monolith monsters are elder dragons that have been born from these elder dragons, and she's killed multiple of them. And Kirishima and Tetsu Tetsu have become really great friends, and they're normally in a hunting party. But Tetsu Tetsu's gotten really close with Anko, and they've actually been sharing lovely nights together when they're not on hunts. And Kirishima says, I'm going to just stay here. You guys go back and have fun. And he winks at Tetsu Tetsu, and Tetsu Tetsu, who hardens his hand without Kirishima noticing, and punches Kirishima in the head. And Kirishima's like, what the hell is that for? And he goes, that's to say goodbye and stay out of my life. And Kirishima goes, okay, fine. They get back, and Izumi is immediately found, and they say, so where have you been for the last 10 years? And she says that I've been home, and I'm now ready to face this world completely. And I'm going to end it here. If you guys want me to go more in depth and make this a series, tell me in the comments and like this video, and I'll do that. But I got stuff to do, and if I don't do it today, my parents are going to ground me and take away my phone, so I can't do any more YouTube videos, and I don't want that to happen because you guys like my content. So, goodbye. Talk to you guys later. Sayonara. Peace.